Everyone. Hello. Today we have actually Michael Barngrover with us, and I'm really happy to have him. Here at VolareVers XR sessions. Actually, it's our session 3, if I'm not mistaken. But we will have more for sure. And I would like to just briefly introduce Michael to you, and then we can start with our session. So, Michael is managing director of XR4 Europe, but also founder of XR Türkiye, but also he's doing actually, and of course he's founder and the lead developer in the Raptor Dance Studios. I cannot even uh, count his contributions to the XR market, and you will see how actually what kind of contribution he made, what kind of remarkable things actually he made for the XR industry in a moment during our session. I prepared many questions. I prepared many questions related to especially training and development. So we will get onto this immediately. So, Michael, I would like to actually start directly with our session, and I would like to just ask not maybe question, but I would like to make a comment on XR, the definition of XR, and the perceptions about the XR, because generally, actually, we live in an environment where emerging technologies never stop advancing, and XR, when I say XR industry, actually, gaming is the most, let's say, the gaming is the thing, the technology that people actually understand if somebody says, oh, XR technologies, but actually there is beyond. And today, actually, we would like to shift our focus more towards, let's say, education and learning. And I would like to start with maybe general overview, because there's a perception, there's some understandings, and how we should understand actually, especially XR, except gaming, especially in a learning and development sector, especially in a training industry, especially in training industry in business. I would like to hear your opinions as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Attila, for having me and for kind of kicking off with. I don't think that's one question or topic. That's a whole lot of questions and topics wrapped together. You're absolutely right that because these technologies that we loosely bundle together as extended reality technologies are always changing. It creates a lot of confusion as to what people are talking about, because you honestly start talking about something new, but there's a disagreement among some whether this is distinctly two things that you're talking about. An example being AI. Do you talk about XR and AI as two separate topics and how they're converging and coming together, or do you assume that AI is a part of XR now and going forward, and that's just a reality? So when you talk about XR, you by definition are inclusive of AI, or in the past would have been a blockchain, or it would have been, um, the inside out tracking, the computer vision elements. Like, do you assume that these are there, or do you just refer to them distinctly? It depends on the person and depends on the year, even, right? I think now when we talk about VR, and mixed reality, or to bring that up, now that VR headsets, all the new VR headsets for the last year are also mixed reality headsets. Do we continue talking about VR and mixed reality as distinct concepts? Because for many people, they're not going to be as distinct. It used to be you had two different devices. Now you have one device. So the inherent similarities for the user, for a use case, for the developer, become a lot more obvious. And so to respond to that first point, the fact that everything is evolving and increasingly converging, coming together, that's actually what more and more people are talking about, I would say now, when I'm part of discussions around XR, is that how do we define XR? In one way, we define it as it's the end point where all these different technologies that may be developing separately and have other use cases, but where they all come together is in XR. And that doesn't make it any easier to talk about, in some ways, but hopefully that starts to sink in a little bit, that XR is really about the user experience and the purpose and the utility, which then falls into what your other question about. really breaking away from the gaming definition and the gaming context into other contexts. And it's interesting that you say, right, that for gaming is kind of the dominant context that people understand XR, virtual reality and augmented reality, because that's true for some. That's true for probably a lot of the consumer market. Um, but for the people that I often engage with who are more in the public policy side, so looking at societal impacts, or the industrial side, who make their money in the simulation and the training and concepts like industrial metaverse or enterprise metaverse. For these people, gaming is not even really anything that they're aware of. They know that people play games and they know that VR is used for gaming, but they actually very much underestimate the importance of gaming and the size of it in the XR industry. So in the same way that people who are closer to the gaming world don't recognize how much money in business is in the enterprise and industrial space for XR, similarly, the industrial enterprise space, for some reason, just they're quite dismissive of gaming as a sector. And then it's actually for me, it's one of the biggest reasons why people struggle to find the talent that they need to develop the applications that they want to utilize in their business. They're looking for an industrial engineer who can make a really great VR training application, when a game developer with experience in spatial design and interactive design and immersive environments, that person maybe has no idea what you want to train, what the context is, but they know how to make it if you tell them what it is important to train. And so when I engage with people in like the European Digital Skills Initiative, the Advanced Digital Skills Initiative, they're trying to respond to this perception that Europe does not have enough virtual world creators, XR creators. They don't have they don't have enough trained people. And my takeaway is there's an awful lot of people who don't find enough projects, because in some cases they're seen as a creative or a game developer, and so they're not recognized that their skills have many applications in industrial and enterprise sectors.
Yes, I do agree actually, because even when we are talking about even with the people, the clients, the companies, there is a like understanding, and we don't even think how we can utilize extra technologies in our daily lives. I mean, I'm not talking about only, of course, the entertainment, etc., but actually we can make them beneficial for our daily lives. I mean, literally for healthcare, I don't know, for education, for fashion, for some other things. We can do many things, and I believe that there's no. I mean, limit is the sky. Let's say even because we just need to think how we can just implement those technologies actually into different fields. And I was also wondering because. Especially we said like we are focusing on the learning and development and the technology, how we can implement the technologies in the learning and development or the training. So I'm also wondering because, as you said, yes, you can tell them what do you need. Is that like a part of the training program or something? You can develop, they can develop, they can create, but also, for instance, in our case, we are working with organizational psychologists who are specialized in a learning methodology, and they are
Mhm.
actually like creating this whole methodology stuff and the learning experiences in immersive worlds, etc. But I'm also wondering how we can just define here, especially under the XR technologies, how we can just say that XR technology is impacting learning and development actually programs in, especially in businesses. Because yes, they have a specific department for learning and development, but they also have IT department, they have digital transformation department,
Yeah.
and who is dealing with XR? I mean, who is the responsible department for XR actually when it comes to an implementation in the in a corporate? So I'm curious about your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, you listed those departments, and the question is, which is the department that blocks an XR initiative? Which is the one? Because usually it's IT, but it's not always IT. It's just usually IT is that last person who says, "This is hard. This doesn't work with what we already have set up, and our job is to not allow anything, to risk our systems, right? So they're just they're risk averse. That's what their job is, and I think they're not the only ones. So coming back down to like what is an XR training, a VR training in particular? What does it offer? A lot of different things, but what are the things that it offers that are compelling for a company to pay for, to invest effort and resources to explore, not just as a pilot study. That pilot studies can sometimes just be, just for fun, almost, just to see, get some internal knowledge. And some oftentimes in the ones that I've been in the past, it's just for excitement. It's nothing very serious, just for some internal marketing and excitement for people. Um, but so what is it that a company wants from a virtualized or digitized training? It's usually cost reduction. What it isn't is a new way to train and teach. That's less common, and I think that's one of the it's a double-edged sword, because virtual training can be, in many cases, much cheaper, which is why you see so much virtual training. That value proposition is compelling, it's measurable, and it's largely been proven now for many, many years. There's not a question about VR training, the return on investment from a cost perspective. Um, what's harder, though, is to adapt your training program and your assessments, and adapt your how the training fits into a career development, and to have content at all these different stages perhaps of it. It's really requiring a company to change what they many ways what they do. It's a change initiative, and that's less compelling, because now that again becomes risky. And was anybody complaining about the training before? We were complaining about the cost of training. So I think that's the reason why simulation and training is a safe place to be in if you're a VR developer, and if you're a company, it's a safe place to invest. Um, but at the same time, you often, as a developer, I think, or as a designer, you start to see like there's low hanging fruit if you just commit to adapting your process a little bit more, engage more stakeholders, and develop an internal appetite for change. You'd get a lot more benefit out of a VR training initiative, beyond just this is a bit cheaper and maybe a little easier to regular to make consistent across users. Beyond that, there's a lot more potential that isn't always realized by companies.
Yeah, I do agree, because I mean, especially when you're talking about the challenges as well, because it's, yes, it's definitely cost effective, and when it comes to even the effectiveness and the how, even we should ask this question: how we can impact, what kind of outcomes we should anticipate at the end of an XR training. This question definitely should be asked. But
Hmm.
when it comes to especially like these talks, I mean, even big companies. I mean, when we say, like, when we see their names, we say big players. They're a bit like also like hesitate when it comes to like entering this XR field as a training, or I don't know, as even like a department base. Let's say if they would like to establish a department responsible for XR, no, they don't go for it directly, and they even hesitate to get only one XR project for the companies, regardless of the price, regardless of the
Hmm.
scope of the project. I don't understand, of course, but I'm also trying to see the issue from their perspective, their point of view. But also we need to do something, of course, because I mean, this is the future, and it will be just inevitable. Actually, they cannot avoid from extra technologies or AI technologies we are discussing all the time. But yes, and speaking of these challenges, uh, we are talking about implementation challenges, we are talking about price challenges, we are talking about the financial parts, and what kind of actually challenges we might have. Because even not only this, of course, we will discuss the financial part, etc., or the implementation, but also I believe there is a challenge to adopt people actually how to use XR or how to use these headsets, because
Hmm.
there's a resistance even the organizational culture in a corporate. And there are some challenges, of course, when it comes to I don't want to say, but when it comes to the understanding of new technologies or the age, they perceive it totally different. Because if my way of learning is to go to the class, to see the presentation, to
Mhm.
listen to the teacher or instructor, so this is my habit, and I cannot change it maybe after 40 years.
But
But
why would I? Because I've proven I'm good at that. Why
yes,
do I need to be good in something else? Yeah.
yes, and this is a challenge, of course. And even if that person or those people, of course, if they are the decision maker, I mean, our job is actually is double. I can definitely say it will be double, because first we need to convince them this is something beneficial for their businesses, and it will be also effective for as an outcome actually for employees. And
Yeah.
in that case, actually, what kind of challenges did you face actually so far, especially even like in projects in Europe or in any other country or in any other region that you can give an example? That would be really nice to hear actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, I had two specific experiences in the training, industrial training application, both in Turkey. Um, but you know, at XR for Europe, we work with a lot of our members are across the spectrum. There are research institutions and national associations, but also SMEs that are providing the services for the big companies that when the European Commission holds a, you know, a big policy roundtable, they're talking to these big companies who usually don't actually make the VR application that they're talking about. You know, they're talking about their experience of using it. And anyway, so at XR for Europe, we often engage a lot more with the SMEs who are making those experiences, and so I get to talk with them a lot, and it validates my experiences. You know, in that. So, you know, in two cases, as I was saying, um, which follow up with what you said. In one case, they simply didn't trust their employees. These are blue collar laborers, they said. We don't trust them with expensive hardware. They're going to break it. We cannot trust that. So we want to do this. We want to implement this new XR. And I actually heard that in two cases. One was VR and one was AR. You know, so and these were a couple years ago, but still, you know, the AR device was a cheaper one. It was about 800, 1,000 euro or something. One of these old, you know, these Vuzix ones. And then the VR one was a Quest. Actually, what they were using a Go, and they were interested in doing it for Quest at that time. So, you know, much cheaper, but they still were feeling like we want to do this new type of novel training. We have a budget for it. It's a pilot study, but it was strange because again, the decision making right is distributed. And if you're a developer or you know you're working with enterprise clients, you're like, I'm talking to this person. At some point, I realize this person is not the decision maker of what we're doing. So you know, this negatively affects the ideation of a project because the implementer might not believe in it, or the implementer may have different bosses, and one boss believes in it, and one boss is seeing it as a risk in some other way. You know, oftentimes in IT, saying, you know, we're the ones who get in trouble if someone breaks this device. So, so that was one experience that just fundamentally a barrier to actually utilizing it was they didn't trust their employees because in some cases they were older, not just blue collar, but older blue collar. So there was an ageism. The people I was speaking to there were actually quite young. The project managers were in their 20s, you know, and they were talking about people in their 30s and 40s employees, and they didn't, you know, so that age gap is very, very real. But the ageism, um, I often think is exaggerated, right? If it's a good VR application and it's presented in a respectful, engaging way with the user, age is something that oh yeah maybe there's something you have to speak about it differently, but age is not a reason why someone cannot use a VR training. But if you have an already a bias because you think they're old and they're not going to do this, or they're not going to be good at it, or they're not educated to do it, right, then this all feeds into the way you talk to them and you don't engage them in the process. So coming back to, is it a change initiative or is it some type of internal experiment that you're playing on your employees? You know, that was my experience, is that it was an internal experiment. It wasn't really a change initiative that respected the user. And as the designer and developer, my first concern was the people who are going to wear the headset and to be assessed in it. If they're going to be judged in a way that may affect their career, then I really need to put the focus on them and how they're going to use it. But in the projects that I saw, that was not really how that project, enterprise or industrial projects don't develop in that way. And I've heard that validated by others in other parts of Europe. So I think everything you talked about the challenges to doing it around things like age and departments, that's my experience, and that's how those issues came up.
I agree as well, because like even when I was thinking, especially from, I mean, I don't want to say, of course, the only reason is the age, etc. But also, when we were talking about like this learning and development departments, the training specialists, professionals, I mean, I know I'm coming from the learning industry, and I know how much a normal, like a traditional training course costs, and
Hmm.
it's not like something. Less than, I don't know, let's say four digits, and even more than this, I will be very honest, because if they go for certifications, etc., even it will go higher. But in that case, I'm thinking from the XR point of view, especially if they actually transform, and even they do it only, like, they can do it only for one people at once, and they just send it, I mean, that those employees to, I don't know, abroad, some other countries, just to get trained or to
Hmm.
get certified. But it's lots of actually financial cost, actually, when it comes to the budget, the learning and development budget. But in XR especially, we said, okay, if you would like to do it, I mean, do it in a way that, I mean, okay, you can get the simulation or whatever, but will be definitely cost effective when you see it in a long term. uh, this is the thing that, I'm also trying, I'm literally struggling with. But also there's one more thing, awareness. If you're talking about a learning specialist or human resources, like the especially responsible for the talent development, they're a bit like, uh, how to say, they're a bit like lost in the definition of XR. Or they know,
Hmm.
for instance, if I say metaverse, they know what I'm talking about, but if I say extended reality, it's kind of bit blurred actually in their minds, especially when it comes to training and learning. This was like the two things
Yeah.
actually from my side. I mean, I can definitely contribute from that perspective as well.
And
But
we were talking recently. I forget now who I was talking with. I think I was in Helsinki for the Metaverse in Action conference. The Finnish Metaverse strategy, which is very industrial oriented. And I was talking with one of the colleagues there, serving these clients, and it was important for them, and they believe for all people who are developing training applications and with XR, is don't talk with HR. You have to talk with the manager of that process. But it's for two reasons. One, the HR person, because there was an HR person there who was like, yes, we just, when it comes to us, we just approve the budget, but we don't know the processes. That's not our job, so we can't really assess the training application or its merits. We just, if it's approved at one point, then we're just a final approval. But I think to your point, and it builds off of that HR person is not responsible for training. They're responsible for the training program. And VR is typically a specific use case. It's a specific thing that you're learning. So it's too granular in detail for an HR person. It is for a manager to say that is the skill that my employees must have. I can recognize it. I see that VR is providing that training. So, when you talk to a company, well, but if you're from the outside and you're looking to, connect with a potential client, this is where it gets harder, because the HR person would seem to be who you're directed to or who you reach out to because you're providing training. But the HR person is not they're looking for full programs. They're not looking for a specific skill development, exercise, which is a little bit more what VR is oriented to. So I think that's what makes it also hard for companies. It's very hard to connect the creator, because we're still talking. I mean, because as you said, the awareness is such that you can't talk to just anybody. You've got to talk to the few people who really know the thing you're making, and those people are not used to engaging with trainers directly. So it's early in this process.
True, definitely true. Because even from our experiences, I would say that even not like directly contacting with the manager of that process, but I would highly recommend directly contact with the CEO, or I mean CSO or CTO of the company, literally. Because I once we did one thing, we just actually created, of course, in our sales pipeline, we just checked the datas. We got more responses from high level directors more than learning and development professionals in companies.
True.
Especially, it's remarkable. I mean, it's remarkable. Not only for, I mean, from the point of view of a decision maker, but also from our point of view, it's remarkable because we are focusing on learning, but we are getting the response mostly from CEOs, I don't know, CSOs,
But
etc.
but again, it's because what are you offering? The same thing happens in education. Principals of schools are much more likely to say, yes, let's do a VR project than a teacher. Because at the end of the day, the teacher in that example, or the learning specialist in yours, is being asked to change what you've been doing successfully to be in that job. For more money? No. For the same money, for the same job you're doing otherwise. Whereas the boss, the principal, or the CEO of a company is like, oh, that might save us money. And that's half of my job, is to make more money and to save money.
Yes.
So, the value proposition is so much more compelling for that decision maker than for who also has a temporary transactional relationship with your question. They can come to a decision in one moment, in theory, whereas the learning specialist or the instructor, the teacher, it's like, this is a marriage. I am now committed to a relationship with this tool or this service or this technology, and coming back down to the same way, when you want to engage, like I said, a successful change initiative, you have to engage stakeholders to get them to accept and buy in. You have to do it with your users and the students, but you absolutely have to do it with the instructor, the learning specialist, or the teacher.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And yes, it will be, I believe, it will be still remain maybe the same for some time, but
Yeah, I
definitely
agree.
challenge, I guess, for us. And of course, right now I will be just a bit like, get calm, because we are talking, of course, the challenges, negative parts, etc. But also, I would like to maybe mention about like what kind of trends actually we can anticipate even here for business trainings, especially when it comes to XR.
Yeah.
Because I know there are some challenges that we are facing, and even, I mean, we are facing every day. I believe in every project, every proposal, every client talk, we are facing some challenges. But also there are some good things, that there are some, of course, some clients, some corporations, some even institutions, universities, schools, etc., that are totally aware of the importance of XR technologies when it comes to the implementation, and they started already, and they are doing something at least.
Mhm.
So especially if we are talking about like the trends, what we can say about the trends, especially in business trainings, I
Yeah.
mean, we can talk about, of course, the industries, etc., but especially trends. I mean, what we should focus on in that case.
Well, I mean, I just to connect it to, I mean, the challenge that we're describing is that not enough people know about it. But that's one of the better challenges, because that's not a fundamental challenge. That's a
Mhm.
challenge that kind of solves itself over time. The question is how quickly, if you have a company or you're a professional, like how quickly is that change happening? Um, but people are becoming more aware, because it's simply, once a company has done one or two or three, there's simply more people in that company and in the companies that their employees ultimately go to, because their career develops into, organically it's growing, and that's the trend. XR in every sector is still not exponential growth, but it is consistently organic growth. It's never gotten smaller in the last 6 or 7 years. Private investment, that goes up and down year to year, but in terms of use, and in terms of business coming from enterprise training and industrial training, that grows every year. So that trend is going to continue, though, which is unfortunate for some, that it's not going to be exponential. But as we're describing, there are really changes, I mean, in the industrial case at least, that require changing of processes, and processes don't change easily. They often do not change successfully. So we often are saying generationally, we might need to be waiting for companies that are established, knowing and incorporating these processes early, from the beginning in the company's construction, um, or just wait until eventually more decision makers have had a decade of experience with these tools and technologies, and they're not maybe excited or enthusiastic, but that's okay. They simply know that it provides a value and a service. It's a cheaper way of doing something that is that has other benefits. That coming back to that other challenge we talked, that I definitely emphasized, was the value of the return on investment by being cheaper is great, cool, but there's so much more that a really good VR training can do, and it's oftentimes many of the successful projects simply aren't successful in that way. They're only successful in that they were in fact acceptable quality and cheaper, but they didn't challenge, they didn't provide new ways of growth and new ways of improved learning and more sustainable learning, because change was required, and change wasn't really possible in that company or with that user, that user base. But that again, just every year, the number of projects where someone says, "Hey, we've done a project before. We know what its value is, but we want you to do better, and we want you to tell us. We want to actually engage with you because now we know enough to know we can do better." So they demand more, and that's really quite satisfying for a designer and a developer to work with a client who knows enough to want more, and to value that, to know that we can get that. What we want is something better. What can you do for us that's really going to open up some new opportunities for us in this training?
I can add one more thing here, because especially we're talking about the understand. I mean, if the client understands us, I do agree. And there's two things actually, because we are talking about the Europe, GCC, etc. And from our experiences, I can add one more thing, especially for. I mean, of course, the client should understand you, but also the partners as well, because I mean, as long as your partner understands you, actually, they can find more. Let's say they can create more channels, and they can connect you
Yeah.
with some companies that already can understand you better than any other company actually in the field, if you reach out to them, I don't know, on LinkedIn or normal sales activities, whatever. But definitely I do agree, and definitely, if even, I mean, if we have any audiences from my startup environment, I can definitely say that partners should definitely understand you, and we are lucky actually in that case. I can definitely say that because we have two partners at the moment. One is from Montenegro and one is from Saudi Arabia. They know the XR inlets, they know what companies can need, and they know actually what we are doing. And especially when you say learning methodology, learning experience, they know what it means, what they mean. And I think this is quite important aspect for companies, not only for the client's point of view. But yes, okay, we were talking about, of course, like the industry training, etc. But Michael, because this question I think is so expected from us, because we are also like creating a virtual world, and I would like to actually go into virtual worlds part of it. In that case, because okay, simulations are part of XR trainings, and they are quite important. And when it comes to virtual worlds, especially right now, actually we are going to release our first, I mean, the virtual campus in June. I mean, the first
Mhm.
version will be released in June. And actually we designed it for corporates only, for corporate trainings, with the simulation library, with the software actually supported, as a let's say XR learning management system supported. And we did it actually for only corporate learning ecosystem. And it will be more, of course, for this collaboration environment and the training environment, etc. But there are also really nice, I mean, examples from, as you said, from Finland, from even from Germany, Rome. Like we have
Mhm.
some examples actually. How do you see, especially developments of the virtual worlds within the region, considering the training, learning, and the especially learning strategies of corporates? How do you think? I mean, what kind of standpoint we should actually take in that case, in especially as a virtual world creators, what would you recommend us, not only to VolareVers, of course, to everyone actually?
Yeah, it's interesting because if I think about virtual worlds, and so for those in the audience who may be wondering why now we're using a new term, virtual worlds, that we weren't using before, um, virtual worlds has, as a term, has gained prominence because the European Commission has put forth last summer an initiative, a strategic initiative called Virtual Worlds and Web 4.0. And it's because they are preferring the term virtual worlds to something like XR or metaverse, because, or virtual reality even, because they find virtual worlds to be more encompassing of all these different use cases. Because they're thinking very much about societal and consumer impact and concerns, but at the same time, just as much, they're really focusing on what people call the industrial metaverse, which is typically digital twins. And so it's actually not immersive, it's not virtual, it's not multi-user, it's, in some cases, it's not even really visualized in some three-dimensional sense, even if the objects themselves are physically three-dimensional. So anyway, so because of that, this term virtual world has really become an important one. If you're in Europe, you need to have it in your, in your vocabulary, and you need to be comfortable to determine what do you mean by it, and make that clear, because others may very well mean something else. Where XR for Europe is in two Horizon Europe projects, one called XR for Human, and the other is called OpenVerse. And I'll get to your question, Attila, but just to phrase the virtual world issue is one that it's like any other new addition to the library, to the vocabulary. Everyone's having to adjust themselves to establish these borders, and it's not a complete process. In XR for Human and OpenVerse, they have been working to do that in both cases, in their own ways, and other Horizon Europe projects are having to do the same. But the rest of us eventually in industry will have to follow suit at some point. But to come back to, so virtual worlds, let's say we're talking about a three-dimensional multi-user platform featuring three-dimensional space and avatars. So the reason I said all that stuff before is because in some cases people say virtual world must be immersive with a headset, and in most cases that I hear, you do not. Fortnite is an example of a virtual world. And I think that's I think it's fair. I think virtual worlds as a term is meant to be very broad. So I have not seen your virtual campus, but I'm presuming it's something that can be engaged with without a headset. But correct me if I'm wrong. But it presents the opportunity for different types of accessibilities and everything. So anyway,
Correct.
that's an acceptable use of virtual world as a term, but for some people it's not. But I'm okay to call that a virtual world. And so to get back to my other point is, I don't know many virtual worlds that are inherently, formally educational. I'll say formally because any type of multi-user experience is inherently educational, or it can be educational. You have two people exchanging information. You have everything you need to be an educational platform. But there are very few virtual world platforms that are formally educational. Engage historically was that platform that tried very hard to be educational. Their structure was built around universities and instructors. But they struggled. I believe they have struggled in that space. And you reference other platforms, enterprise platforms like ROM. There's Arthur, there's Glue, there's Meet in VR. These are all incredible places where you can totally learn, but those have effectively been more for like meetings.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. So totally learning takes place, but it's not a formal educational virtual world platform. It's a virtual world meeting platform. And that's an important distinction, because there are tools that you expect in formal education that most platforms don't build in, because they don't have a lot of utility. I mean, Engage was one of the few that, because they originally went in that direction in 2016 and such, they have this legacy of these types of teacher, like classroom moderation, classroom management tools, which are not common in many of the virtual world platforms that we just mentioned, because those types of controls really don't make as much. They don't create as much value in an enterprise like campus, a company campus type of thing, or a university campus, even, where there's more egalitarian concepts for users. So I'm really looking forward to your virtual campus, because I do think that we still haven't quite, as an industry, unlocked this filled this gap between basically what is an educational app, very formal, quite rigid, and then a more of a kind of a company managed virtual world environment, but something in the middle which can bring the best of both worlds together. It's hard, and I have not seen it very much. So I'm looking forward to yours.
I can definitely say that. One more thing actually about how we came up with this idea, even because I believe you said exactly how we came up with this idea, but I would like to also mention about this part, because as you said, there are many virtuals only for meetings and the collaboration, but when it comes to learning, a solid learning platform is something different, and we should take into account many dynamics, many elements related to learning, and the learning experience of each individual, not only for us, of course, not only for corporates, but if you're talking about even the learning, we shouldn't just, I mean, in my opinion, of course, I mean, this was our motivation, let's say, we shouldn't only create the virtual space and just tell them, okay, you can collaborate, you can use it to, tools, etc. No, toolbox is one of the most important thing for sure, but also there is an experience part which includes toolbox, I don't know, some interaction, some realistic and realistic experiences, let's say, and also learning methodologies. Because apart, if you don't include, I mean, this learning methodologies into the immersive environment, this will not be. In any case, even if we add as many as toolbox into the virtual campus, it will not be a solid learning platform because it's missing the virtual. Sorry, learning methodologies and the learning theories that can impact on individuals' experiences. I think this is very much important point. Actually, that's why I'm telling in our team. I'm telling you, in our team, we are having organizational psychologists, learning and development
Mhm.
professionals only for this purpose. Because of course, it's not like it will not be in the first version. It will be. Let's not like set the bar high that much. I was excited right now. But definitely, phase by phase, we are adding this learning experience part toolbox for different fields. We will add more toolbox. We will add more simulations. We will support it with some behavioral analysis. I can definitely say that because I believe for learning, okay, learning is three parts: pre-training, training, and the post-training. And if
Mhm.
we don't, I mean, evaluate the three dimension of the training, I believe we will be missing again outcomes, and we will missing again the learning profiles of each participant or each student or each, I don't know, employee. I think this is also like a challenge for virtual verse because uh, behavior part is quite crucial, has been quite crucial so far for VolareVers and for our team. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible actually to come up with this idea because we are even relying on avatars' behavior, individuals' behavior in the virtual world, how they behave during the learning. It's like a training and the post-training era, let's say, or the training and the post-training
Mhm.
phases that we can analyze for each individual. I
I
definitely
mean, it's
agree.
it's a huge challenge because and the word campus is so ambitious. A classroom, that's already really hard, because I often say I don't think VR is great for classrooms, because classrooms ideally are a specially designed learning environment. It's hard to be a lot better than that. You can totally be better, right? You can have a better VR environment, but it's harder than having a better version in VR of an empty room, like a meeting room, because a meeting room is just like a table, some chairs, and maybe a screen. But a classroom, a proper, and again, when I say a proper classroom, there are many, people will very, very quick to tell me how bad the education is in their country or in their public school systems, or, and I agree with, that's true. But a proper classroom as a point of reference, it's very hard to improve on its diversity, its total capacity to engage different methodologies of learning. So, and of course, a campus, which is referencing many different facilities. Again, now you're saying, okay, I'm going to do better than a classroom designed for a subject by growing it to be better than 10 classrooms designed to be very good environments for 10 different subjects, and the different methodologies that make sense for them. So you're right. You have to do it iteratively. You have to find the right ones to start with, because the physical campus, whether it's a corporate campus or it's a university campus or a high school campus, they are old, but they are the accumulation of generations of physical learning methodologies and styles.
True.
And VR, you can try to replicate, but it's incredibly difficult to replicate because the real world, the physical non-VR world or non-digital world, is incredibly complex. So when you're digitizing it and virtualizing it, you have to choose what elements to incorporate. And you quickly realize it's a lot. So you have to find the right ones that get people committed early on, that the demand is greatest, so that you have behavioral studies, behavioral information to improve upon, and people who are motivated enough to deal with the fact that your campus may not be very good at the beginning compared to the physical reference point, but that it will improve, and they're going to realize, how it can improve, right? Because they're actually the people, right, who tell you this is going to make this so much better. So they have to be committed to learn that themselves, and then take the time to tell you that in a useful way. So it's incredibly ambitious, but that is what a lot of people are chasing. That's what a lot of people really do want around the world. In some markets, the demand isn't quite as obvious, but in many parts of the world, they really see the value, because maybe their physical infrastructure is not as historically invested, is not as built out. A virtual version of that would bring them up to speed, up to equivalence, much faster than trying to invest, millions or billions in physical infrastructure that they haven't been accumulating over time. So virtual campuses, I see having the greatest value outside of the North American or the European market. I see its inherent value as a superior learning environment being in many other parts of the world with less invested infrastructure.
Oh, I do agree. I do agree, and I believe there's definitely room for improvement for everybody. I guess here, I mean, for all virtual world creators, I believe there's definitely room for improvement, and we are also trying to take this, of course, the point of view, especially from the learning point of view. We should look at what we are creating and what we are actually producing, what we are even adding as a small feature. We should definitely consider it from the learning point of view. Otherwise, I mean, we were discussing in the Leap event with Aramco's actually like VR, actually one of the VR projects. They were like this telling us, and we were just directly agreed. There is no need to put coffee machine into virtual campus if you're not using it, and if you cannot use it, use it.
Oh
So
yeah. Everything has to have utility. Yeah, everything
exactly,
has to have utility, because it
ex-
does in the real world typically. Things have
exactly,
some type of utility. Yeah. Yeah. I don't
exactly.
know if you remember AltSpace. For those in the audience who remember AltSpace, because it's not been gone that long. But AltSpace, I can say it. I love many people who loved AltSpace. I never loved AltSpace. It always angered and frustrated me how undeveloped it was after Microsoft got it. Before Microsoft, different story. But one of the things that they had these whiteboards. What did you think you could do with a whiteboard? It had these markers. They weren't interactable. They were just static. They were just static markers and pens. It's like, why would you put this in here? Because you show a picture of meetings and you're saying you can use this for professional meetings with whiteboards, and the whiteboards are just static props. They're not interactable in any way, for a long time. I don't know if maybe they ever did make them interactable before the end. I don't think so. But that's your point. It's a great example that you don't put anything in there without purpose, because users will be frustrated and annoyed by that. You're teasing something that they can do and then immediately reminding them you can't do it. But outside of this environment, you can. You're encouraging them to go outside, back to some other place. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree. There's like, I mean, there are lots of things to mention about, of course, tell about this virtual words. But of course, I mean, considering our time, I would
Yeah.
like to actually go another part of this XR word, because especially in Europe, in GCC, I mean, considering especially in Saudi Arabia, data privacy policies, the strategies in 2020, sorry, Saudi Arabia strategy for 2030, there are some restrictions and there are some security policies. And even in Europe, we had already, I mean, AI Act
Yeah.
recently, and there will be, I don't know, so maybe something will be virtual words, but how we
Not
can
anytime
expect.
soon.
Yeah, I
Not
don't.
yeah,
I
thankfully, not anytime soon. Yeah.
yes, and even one conference, I think it was Metaverse Spectrum. They said it will be. I mean, it's impossible to control Metaverse or regulate Metaverse or XR. I mean, the virtual verse, 100%. I do agree. It's impossible to even the control 100%.
Well, we
But
hope so.
yeah, but should we expect something in that case? I'm not sure. I mean, because there are some, I don't know, they are trying to, of course, regulate this crypto and NFTs, etc., whatever. But I mean, for virtual words, because especially when it comes to this crime and the ethical point of view, there are different cases. There might be some, of course,
Mhm.
abuse case, etc. But should we expect something in terms of, especially in that part?
I would like to see. We don't need a full virtual world regulation, because a lot of existing regulation covers, many things in virtual environments, virtual worlds, and such. The question is, should it cover it the way we're interpreting it now? The interpretation of it into this new context is, I think, what needs more development. It's not new regulation as of yet, but and again, from my understanding, it's going to be quite a while before there's a Virtual Worlds Act. That can always change, right? These are organic political bodies that they respond to the demands and expectations of their citizens. So that can totally change. But right now, it doesn't seem like there's going to be one in Europe. And if there's not one in Europe, it's Europe who's usually at the vanguard of regulation for societal security.
Yes.
But they are engaging with it. So because I was a speaker maybe 3-4 weeks ago at an event called the High Level Internet Governance Committee, or working group. I think not committee, working group. And this was these were populated in the audience by representatives of European Union member states who have these initiatives looking at internet governance as it applies to virtual worlds. So I would say that generally speaking, the AI Act, for example, it definitely applies to virtual worlds. Um, it 100% applies when AI is there. The problem is, in many cases, AI is always going to be there. If you take a broad view of what artificial intelligence, like, depending on how you can make it very narrow, the definition, you can say generative AI, and okay, then there's some virtual world stuff that doesn't use that historically. But if you take a broader view of that term, then all virtual worlds in modern sense use something of it. So the AI Act applies, and Internet Governance Act applies. The Digital Markets Act applies. So there's already a lot of regulation, but I would say what we definitely need in Europe and probably everywhere is more informed interpretation of how it applies or how it should apply. Because in the absence of an informed interpretation, we have a lot of confusion. We have a lot of inconsistency that this is, this act, right? Harassment, sexual harassment, and assault in virtual worlds There are many who say it should have the same penalties as in a non-digital real world, and then there are other people who don't agree, who say they're fundamentally different. I don't believe they could be the same, and it's these are two extreme positions on a topic that there's 100% truth on both sides, though harassment in a virtual world is probably closer to the real thing than it is nothing like the real thing. It
Yes.
has a physiological effect on victims, on those affected by it. So it clearly I mean, most people would assume, but again, not everybody. Most people would assume it's a crime, and thus criminal law should apply in that case. But I do think that the interpretation regarding how much does an existing criminal penalty apply to an analogous crime, a similar crime, but not 100% the same crime, because the context is so different. That's where interpretation of existing law and regulation needs to be further developed and researched. So, and I think we're going to see that increasingly, because the more people are in these worlds, the more people will have harmful or negative experiences and will demand that these protections that I come to expect apply to protecting me in these environments more than they do today. They don't; these do not extend into virtual worlds much at all today.
Yes.
But there's a increasing cry and demand that they do extend into virtual worlds.
Yes, I do agree. I do agree. And half body avatars, I maybe could be recommended in that case. Even I'm not sure, because I believe there was a case related to this full body and half body avatars, this sexual harassment case. But yeah, I do agree what you have said related to virtual words. And to be honest, last part, I do
Okay.
have three more questions, maybe short ones, just maybe short answers, please.
Rapid fire. Okay, I'll be quicker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I would like to also focus on a bit, one actually, because I know in our audiences, I know there are many people actually from oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to maybe focus on this industry a bit, and then quickly, I would like to get your recommendation for startups, especially when it comes to market entry, and especially in a learning part, actually in XR, and what would you recommend for them, etc. But first, first comes first. So let's start with maybe oil and gas. Do you have any specific, I don't know, example? Could be not even example, but I'm wondering about your thoughts. How actually they can utilize XR in oil and gas industry? Because in GCC, I know
Mhm.
there are even when it comes to upstream trainings, offshore areas, offshore sites, any kind of upstream trainings could be implemented into XR. Maybe some, of course, they require some long-term projects, but some of them short-term. But still, it's very much effective and cost-effective actually for them. Even because if you are taking students to offshore part in the middle of the ocean, it takes time and it takes some
Oh
money.
yeah, yeah. It's a cost. Yeah.
Yeah, so it like in I mean I'm wondering about your thoughts, how they can utilize in oil and gas, especially as like a very, I mean, a general
Yeah. I mean, I
point.
think the training the training use case is the same for them that it is for everybody. It's just
Mhm.
it's clearly cheaper. You can you can take students across a very large facility or remote facilities in the same learning experience to demonstrate consequences and interconnectedness of these systems. So, but that's true of everything. What I would say is particular to oil and gas, as I understand it, because this is not a sector that I'm very connected to, but many in our industry are connected to it. Is that you're dealing with very large facilities oftentimes, and it's you need remote expertise. I think remote expertise has always been that use case that was particular to oil and gas
Yeah.
facilities that I've seen. So you'd have the expert, or experts in a centralized location, and the field technicians don't have to be experts because they can access that expertise. But the expertise needs to be able to perceive and to see. And you always saw these use cases with like Vuzix, glasses and HoloLens. And I think, honestly, HoloLens was always very oversold beyond its actual capabilities. And I think, you saw a lot of people invest in these very expensive headsets, which are tremendous accomplishments engineering wise. But as a commercial platform, I've always struggled to understand how any corporate would be really satisfied with the HoloLens's performance in these environments. But we are, now that we're several years past HoloLens 2, there are headsets now that do really facilitate remote mixed reality presentation of expertise. The ability, to annotate in space, which was always like a HoloLens example, but was never something that HoloLens could
Yes.
really do. but the video looked nice. But we have headsets like even Quest 3, even consumer level headsets. But then you have the Picos and some of the other, and the HTCs. Um, these, and I mean, you could even do it in theory. You could do it with the Vision Pro if you really trusted, and felt like, your employee deserved the best. Um, you can do these types of remote expertise that are mixed reality, for the technician in the field to access human expertise, and increasingly non-human expertise. Automation through AI, being able to guide and recognize their environment and what they could be doing to problem solve. So I think that's the use case. The remote expertise is far more technically possible now than it was 4 or 5 years ago, and that remains, I think, one of those use cases that is very particular to oil and gas, that isn't as often a big requirement to like a company, a traditional, like,
True,
company.
true, true. Last two questions, but I will
Yeah.
ask at the same time because it's
Okay.
like actually for recommendation for both corporations and the startups. Just like one question, but what would you recommend actually to startups or to, let's say, companies that are thinking to, not companies, maybe even the XR professionals, enthusiasts, whatever, uh, or young entrepreneurs who are thinking entering into XR market, especially in learning or in training or whatever.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for them? Because I know you're also startup mentor, and I think it will be very much valuable advice for them. And plus, what would you recommend for corporations for implementation of XR technologies actually in their organizations? We can
I mean,
just
for the startups, um, I mean, I think just a heads up. I believe that the XR space is going to go through a quiet phase. I think we're entering in a down phase because a lot of investment from companies like Meta are going to be more oriented to AI, because everyone is, it's just shareholders are demanding it. That's the big competition right now.
sure.
It's not that these companies don't see XR as ultimately a place where AI is going to be applied, but it's not going to be the thing everybody's talking about for a little while. So, our industry, XR, tends to be driven by new headsets and the hype cycles that come around, new technology. And I think that's going to be a little slower. Not just because I think, particularly Meta carrying the industry, Meta is going to be developing through AI, the industry through AI a little bit more, with AR, with smart glasses. Their Ray-Ban thing, I think, is going to be their big focus for a little bit, because they're getting really good feedback on that. So smart glasses will be a little bit more the thing than, immersive mixed reality, and VR, which till now has been the more mature and developed sector to be in. So if you're coming in new, just be aware of that. That it's not gonna be you're not gonna be joining at the ascent or at the height of a hype cycle. You're gonna be coming in when it's gonna be a little quieter, which is better in many ways, because it's gonna be easier to find people to work with who are really serious about a product and a solution rather than an opportunity. So there are advantages to that. But for a startup, so let's say you got a company and you're wanting to serve enterprise clients, B2B clients, for example. Number one, are those potential clients are they in your home market, or are they abroad? Number one question, right? I think like, I know people in Bulgaria. They're not making their money off of local Bulgarian projects and clients. They can do them if they want to, but that's not going to sustain their business and grow it. They have to take international clients. It's just number one. So, from the beginning, don't get distracted by the person down the street who you may have some social connections to, who wants your time developing a project for them. Do it if you can, if it's portfolio building and if it's offers you some tangible benefits. But from a business perspective, the more time you spend developing your reputation and your product or company recognition in a market with business for you, that's more beneficial. If your home market is not that market, don't spend so much time in your home market. I would say, I don't know, Attila, what you feel like, but I always saw in Turkey, this was a distraction. The Turkish market, there are projects. You can do all the projects you want in the Turkish market, but it's not a great market if you want to grow in this sector. They are not, they're not consistently well paid or reliable, or they're just challenging. Turkish startups in the XR space serving B2B clients would always be better off developing it outside and taking opportunistically in Turkey when it provided some access to, a holding company and maybe some investment. Then you take that project. So I think if you're a startup, know your market and whether or not it's worth your focus. And if not, identify what markets you are not based in and develop a strategy to be very present in that market.
Uh, I mean, you just referred to us, and as like a Turkish company who started the business in Turkey. I mean, I can definitely say that we didn't target at the very beginning. Even we are not targeting right now. To be honest with you, and not the Turkish market, like because we said at the very beginning, okay, we focus on especially Saudi Arabia and the Oman,
Mhm.
and we directly focus on those markets. Of course, it's similar, let's say, dynamics, but we even specified the countries. And especially for Saudi Arabia, we know the investment, we know the strategies, especially same for Oman. They also have the same tech strategy, let's say. But we focus on them, and we knew, of course, people, we have partners, etc. But otherwise it was impossible to make, I mean, our, let's say, growth possible. And also, plus, not only growth, but also, like, let's talk about also, like, the vision. I mean,
Yeah.
it will be impossible to make our vision, I mean, true, actually, in that, if we focus only the Turkish market. And what we do now is that we are focusing on, so I mean, GCC market, and even and Polish market. And for Polish market, we have some opportunities. We know actually market a bit, like the dynamics, etc.
Mhm.
And there is a lack in some fields, especially when it comes to XR, and it's developing European market. So, but other than that, at the very beginning, as you said, we said, okay, are we targeting Turkish? No. The
Mhm.
answer was simple, and we didn't think twice, to be honest, and we didn't go back to this topic many times. It was clear, and let's go this direction. And it was,
Yeah. I mean,
other than the direction was, I mean, our path was clear, at least.
well, and that's why you're where you are. There are others who I knew in 2016, 17, 18, 19, and they're not always around. And part of it was because they went, they had a strategy that prioritized what seemed like, easier, quicker wins because there was a face-to-face personal, there was a logic to it. They weren't being, they weren't just being crazy. They had a logic to it, but it was a tactical decision rather than a strategic decision.
Hmm.
And just like with they say in investment, don't take investment, take smart investment. Smart money is good. Dumb money is not just money; it's harmful. Same thing with projects. Committing to a project with a partner that doesn't have the ambition or the vision, then that's not a good project for you. That's wasted effort, even if they pay you for it. It's kind of wasted effort because you had the opportunity maybe to find a better project that was going to be developing your skill, developing your team, developing your portfolio, and paying you. So it's, you got to know your situation, but your client is a partner, and you should be you should be selective of your clients is the same way that you are your investors and your partners.
I totally agree. And considering, because it's like an example, maybe, I'm thinking like our partner in Saudi Arabia, we are not like only partners. I mean, we are actually doing, I mean, this vision together. This is very much important for us. It's not like about only the money, or I don't know, defining clients or creating some more opportunities. No, we need to share at the very beginning the same vision, and we are sharing it. then actually we can do something, we can do something together. And
Mhm.
this is, I believe, this is one of the maybe this is the most important thing actually when it comes to finding a partner or finding I don't know, a client, or I don't know, a business partner, whatever. But
Mhm.
I do agree, I do agree, we should share the same vision, the same mindset, and we should go it together. This is very much important for everybody, I guess. So,
Yeah.
okay. So I will not ask more questions.
Yes.
We're already running out of time. And thank you very much for Michael for joining us today. And thank you for all audiences that who watched us or who are watching still. Thank you very much. And don't forget, you will have a chance to watch this session on YouTube again and again. You can just check it out.
It
No
gets,
problem. Yeah, I
yeah, it
mean,
gets better every time. Every time you watch, it gets better. The insight's a little bit more insightful. Yeah.
yes. Every day in the morning after during the breakfast.
Yeah.
That will be
Exactly.
perfect time. So definitely, and I believe we will do more because as VolareVers, we are part of XR Türkiye, we're a member of XR Türkiye, and whatever we do, actually, it serves the Turkish XR ecosystem as well. And I'm always saying, I'm really happy to meet Michael. Yeah, we are part of XR Türkiye. We met in Poland. This is also like kind of a tricky part. But yes, definitely, it will be our case to support ecosystems, XR ecosystem in Poland, in GCC, and also in Turkey. Whatever we do, it will be a pleasure. Thank you very much again. Thank you very much, Michael, and I wish you a great evening ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.